United Lutheran Seminary presents the Seminary Explores podcast, conversations on faith, art, people, politics, theology, life, and more, with voices from around the corner and around the globe. Welcome to the Seminary Explores. I'm Katie Giebenheim. My guest is Elizabeth Pfiester, director and founder of T1 International, which started the grassroots campaign #Insulin for All. A registered charity in the UK, T1 International seeks global access to insulin. It is powered by volunteer advocates. Elizabeth grew up in the United States. She's been a type 1 diabetic since preschool age. She holds a master's degree in international development and humanitarian emergencies from the London School of Economics and Political Science. As a note of disclosure, I am affiliated with the Pennsylvania chapter. Elizabeth, welcome to the Seminary Explores.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So there are a few distinctions about T1 International and the kind of patient organization it is. Maybe you could start with that, especially with the funding, which is a really interesting distinction.
Yeah, of course. So when T1 International was founded, it was founded for a few reasons, really, in part because there wasn't a strong patient advocacy voice that was independent in terms of its funding. So one of T1 International's founding tenets is that we do not accept funding from pharmaceutical companies or really any other company or entity that might influence our ability to speak out and advocate. Many people might have heard about what is now being called the insulin price crisis in the US, and it is a global issue. And drug pricing in general is really, the costs are out of reach for many people. So what's important to us is to be independent and to be able to speak out against the high prices without having influence from pharmaceutical companies, which unfortunately many, the influence is really strong throughout government, throughout organizations, which is part of why the costs are so high, we believe.
And I think this is something that's easy to underestimate because, there are a lot of patient organizations for all kinds of conditions and diseases that do lots of good work, establish a sense of community, help with, research fundraising. But when your primary funding sources are pharmaceutical companies, it really does limit the way that you can speak about needs and the way that you can speak about a lot of things. And I think this is something that it just often doesn't really occur to people, right?
Yeah, certainly. I think it's easy to think, okay, the pharmaceutical companies who make the insulin that we need to survive might be good partners, or it might be good to be in partnership with those entities. And if you don't think a little bit more deeply and get a little bit more under the surface, as you say, it's not always that obvious to see their influence. But these companies, the three companies, Eli Lilly, Novo Nordisk, and Sanofi, who make insulin that we need to survive, control more than 90% of the market, and they make billions of dollars in profit when the cost to produce insulin is only estimated to be about $6 per vial. So in a capitalistic society, profits do drive things, but these kind of profits are a bit out of hand, especially when, unfortunately, people are dying because they have to ration their insulin. And without insulin, people with diabetes can die within days or even hours.
And that's another thing that's different here, is that it's not like they're sort of on the way to finding something that will work, but insulin's been around for like a century. Obviously, there are more kind of sophisticated versions of it, but this is also something that's really that some people also, I think, underestimate what this means to say. And it used to be more accessible than it is now.
Yeah, I think the cost, especially in the US, has gone up exponentially because the companies were able to get away with it in the very complex and broken healthcare system that is the US system. But the companies have also always made maximum profits, and from very early days really wanted to get as much money as they could from insulin. And as you pointed out, it has been around almost 100 years. Next year will be the centenary, and it's pretty abysmal. It's pretty awful that people are still struggling with this thing that is essential for life.
What are some of the partner organizations? This is a global organization. What are some of the other folks that you work with who also have this particular desire, that are really trying to get access as the focus?
Yeah, so we do try to, we work in partnership and collaboration wherever possible. In terms of our global work around the world, there are many individuals and organizations in countries around the world that we collaborate with, whether that's through providing advocacy training and tools and resources to them to fight their own local battles, or actually partnering up for a project or a program. So the Sonia Nabeta Foundation primarily focuses on work in Uganda, but they do work throughout Africa, and we partner with them for what's called the Pamoja Advocacy Project, and Pamoja means together we can. And we train advocates living with type 1 diabetes and help them set advocacy goals, and we're working with young people from 6 different African countries. And then in the US, we partner where possible with groups that have similar principles to us, the non-acceptance of pharma funds, the belief that access to insulin and healthcare is a human right. So Faith in Healthcare is a group that we work with locally when we do an annual event to bring our advocates together and do a sort of demonstration or event outside of Eli Lilly, which is one of the insulin manufacturers, and they've been fantastic partners to us as well.
And so last year, that was an in-person vigil and event that was put on by these 2 organizations. Is there anything planned this year? Because of the pandemic, circumstances, of course, are really changing the way a lot of things are planned. Do you have something lined up for this year?
Yeah, just as you said, the pandemic has changed things for so many people. And as we are a patient-driven and led organization, we didn't want to risk bringing people with the health condition and obviously compromised immune systems together in person. So we will be doing a virtual workshop and a digital demonstration. That will be on the 26th and 27th of September. There will soon be more details available on our website, but we're doing 2 days of virtual sessions, really helping people understand the issues around pharma's influence, and also bringing in as many different perspectives. We have a panel on racial inequities in access to diabetes care and LGBTQ plus conversation, and how that intersects with diabetes. So a real variety of issues and lots of folks in our community coming together. Those will be open to the public, as will be the digital demonstration, which will be social media led. And we're still building that out, but we will be calling out those insulin manufacturers as we have done historically.
Excellent. It seems like these sort of bringing in broader perspective seems to be kind of a hallmark of T1 International, not just trying to raise voices from other geographical areas, and to really get involved globally in this access movement, but also in the US and with all of these different layers, because there are a lot of barriers to misunderstanding what the actual problems are. And some of the things that you just mentioned, that the particular panels that you're setting up with this event, they're really there is this sense of openness that I have observed in T1 International.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that. It's certainly really very important to us, because we want to represent the full diabetes community and what it is. And what that community is people from all different backgrounds and people that represent humans all across the board, as you say, whether that's geographical or socioeconomic status. We want to lift up those perspectives, and we want the organization to be driven by the needs and perspectives of those folks, not just a certain section of the diabetes community.
And I think that sometimes with patient organizations that this happens kind of accidentally, that sometimes people are good intentioned and they're not realizing that representation ends up being very limited. It happens, and I think it's something that people aren't always aware of because they're enthusiastic about sort of striving forward, and they're not realizing that they can actually be excluding people even though they don't intend to be. So it's always good to see examples of it really being lived out, the sort of inclusiveness.
Yeah, certainly. I agree. I think, and I hope more and more organizations will be very intentional and about the way that they are inclusive rather than just saying things. And that comes back to us as an organization too. We want to keep doing this. It's not just a one-time thing. We want it to be an integral part of our work and of who we are as an organization. So yeah, as I say, hopefully others will take similar steps, because there are a lot of perspectives out there and a lot of people whose voices need to be heard.
Could you talk about maybe a couple of, I know it's hard to say a couple of the highlights because, of course, I'm sure every week there are both amazing and frustrating things happening when you're leading an organization like this. It's pretty incredible, and also something that was started because it didn't exist and there was a need for it to exist. Looking back over the past couple of years, are there some things that you could maybe describe as being real highlights for you, or things that you have seen happen or that you have heard that you would just like to share?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I think it's hard to, as you said, to pick even one or two specific things. I think on a bigger picture scale, we now know that the World Health Organization is taking insulin access issues seriously. And I think that was due to many factors and players, but I do believe that our collective voices as a community have been part of why that is now on the radar in many spheres, high-level spheres and local spheres. So to me, that's incredible. And there are many sort of individual interactions with advocates, people who, despite facing significant challenges, still want to push their advocacy forward and understand that this is a sort of long game and it's one step at a time. I can think of many people I've spoken to, but I think what makes me feel always the most excited and just that all of this is worthwhile is that we're trying to show that this is a community effort. There isn't a single hero. It's very easy to point to single stories or create a hero narrative. But for me, and I think for the organization and so many folks who are involved in their local chapter or in this movement as a whole, is just seeing that it's about coming together, and that change throughout history has only ever happened because people came together. There are people who get picked out as leaders or, change makers, and those individuals have a huge part to play, but it's really about all of us. And that's, it kind of ties quite nicely into our workshop theme this year, which is change through community. And just that collective power really excites me.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because it's true. It is easy to sort of pick out leaders. There's a certain efficiency to that, right? When we're describing things and saying, oh, so-and-so made this happen, so-and-so made this happen. But it's interesting, last year in Indianapolis at the vigil, at the event across from the Eli Lilly headquarters, there was really just this vibe of solidarity, and even though there was a strength, but what I would say is also a sort of good-naturedness. I don't even know that that's not really the right term, but it was an assembly of people that may not ever be standing next to each other again, quite in that constellation. Some of them will, right? But this sense of a collective, like, we're here, we're putting our bodies here, and we're doing it as a group. I do think that some of these things you can pick up on if you see it and if you feel it and you realize that there is an intention about a community trying to do something positive, and even through the sense of urgency, there are still ways to do that are constructive, right? Yeah.
And I think sorry if I interrupted, I think we've seen that with COVID, with the coronavirus and the impacts of that. There were legislative sessions that stopped, and our chapter's work really, that changed some of the plans, and instead it turned into this real community support. That was what was most important at the time, and the community was there for each other to check in, see how people were doing during isolation, and then of course with the huge uptick in Black Lives Matter protesting, and the community was supporting each other there to give each other guidance and tips on how to be safe and things to think about. So that these sort of chapters and these grassroots connections that are being built are going to create this long-term change that we want to see, but that underlying support and just keeping each other going is a crucial part of that too.
That has been an interesting sort of byproduct of the strangeness and the current emergency, hasn't it? Do you have anything else that you would like to say about what it's like to be leading an organization in a nonprofit organization in a time of this pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, it's, we were in a really interesting spot, to be truthful, in that, T1 International was built from the ground up. I definitely consider it a very grassroots organization, but before the pandemic hit, we had, after much, much hard work, we had received a grant for 2 years, which has enabled us to add new team members. So we've just brought on some other members of staff, which is amazing to get some help and support for all the work that's going on. So in that sense, we've actually grown amidst the pandemic, which I'm so lucky and it's very grateful that we were able to offer people employment during a time when many people's employment was going the other direction. So that's wonderful. But I think so that's like, from an organizational internal perspective, and it's enabled us again to hopefully better support the chapter's network and offer them more support and advice for them to then that ripple effect to go out to their members and the way that they support their members. But it is always a very challenging time, and just having to constantly, I guess, recenter and make sure that we're providing the best support to the community that we can. And, with people with diabetes, there's also been a lot of scary headlines in terms of how COVID could impact people with diabetes and that kind of guidance. And although we're not a medical organization, so we wouldn't offer medical advice, again, that community support and that just being there for each other has been a significant need, which I hope we're fulfilling to some degree. But it's been a strange year for everyone. And as we are also a virtual organization, everyone, works from their own home. We're all in different parts of the world. It's really been great that we have those setups and structures in place, but it's made things, I think, more hectic than ever. But we're glad that we're here and able to do what we do, and hopefully we'll be able to keep doing that on into the future until this issue is solved.
Yes, which the open-ended time frame is, of course, tricky for everyone. And it's also that, the support that you mentioned is really critical. When it comes to chronic illness, it's not like, sort of a short drama or emergency and then it's cured or solved or taken care of, but it's something ongoing. So that support is really tremendously important, I think, when you have a chronic illness or when you are living with people that have a serious chronic illness. So that's also just really, really important to give that sense of perspective and to let people know that they are part of this extended community, even people that are far away.
Yes.
You've been listening to The Seminary Explores. I'm Katie Giebenhein. My guest has been Elizabeth Pfiester, Director of T1 International. Learn more at t1international.com. That's T and the number 1. Elizabeth, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you again.
You have been listening to The Seminary Explores, a production of United Lutheran Seminary with campuses in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We invite you to visit our website at unitedlutheranseminary.edu. Opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of United Lutheran Seminary or the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America.